coolest guest I've had on Greenlight Podcast, Dr. Oz, somebody I grew up watching on TV, and I'm Mr. WebMD. I'm always, like I got questions for the internet all the time about my health. Now you're sitting right here. I got a bunch of them. Some of them are hangover related.
We'll talk about hangovers, but you mentioned WebMD. So Oprah and I started a company when my show started 10 years ago called ShareCare.
Yeah.
The guy who runs it is the man who founded WebMD, Jeff Arnold, who is a great athlete.
He's helped me a lot.
Yeah, he has. And I'll tell you, it is remarkable how much that has changed the world. Most countries don't have the equivalent of a WebMD or a ShareCare. They got to just go figure it out for themselves.
Well, we're the country that needs it the most.
I know,
right?
exactly. Where hangovers are probably #1 searched item this week, probably. You know, there's Sickness Monday, Super Sickness Monday.
No.
14 million people will call out of work on Monday because they're sick.
From the Super Bowl.
From the Super Bowl.
That's insane. That just goes to show that nobody's watching the game.
They're partying it up. They don't remember the game.
Yeah, they don't remember the game. And I just learned this. You're a Philly guy.
I was born. I grew up in the Philadelphia area. Huge Eagles fan.
There we go.
Huge Eagles fan.
Dude, I love this. This is awesome.
When I came, I come to the game every year, but I came 2 years ago, and I sat with the 76ers.
Oh, really?
To watch the victory, and that.
It's a playoff game.
Yeah, the Super Bowl.
Oh, you get a Super Bowl. You came to the Super Bowl, yeah. Cold.
And that was
cold there. Talk about sick. Did you know the entire team was sick?
No, are you kidding?
We should have called you. I would have fucking hit you up. I'd have said, hey, Doc, come help us out here.
I didn't know that.
Well, we were staying in the Mall of America, right?
Yeah.
And if you know the Mall of America, it's two hotels annexed by the mall.
Right.
And the Patriots were all sick. We were all sick. It's just germs passing, and nobody could go outside.
Well, this event was in that walkway between the two hotels in Mall of America.
Yeah.
And there's a zip line there, and I always think this is like a petri dish.
Yeah, dude, come on. I mean,
well, how did you play like that with that?
Well, I am very aware of my body, and like I'm one of those people. I wouldn't say a hypochondriac, but I'm like borderline. Especially an athlete, you're getting ready for the biggest game of your life. So when you start to feel a little run down, you know when the sickness is coming on, you're like common cold, whatever. Friday night, I'm sitting there, I'm like, am I getting chills? Like, oh no.
Oh no.
And there was guys getting IVs, and it was undercover kind of bad. And when a flu bug hits or something like that in a locker room, forget staff. I mean, but like, it just bounces around fast.
So what did it? So they gave you IVs, they put you on antivirals. What did they do to get you guys better so you could play on Sunday?
I guess we take a lot of Z-Packs. Okay,
yes.
You try not to take too many because then they don't work, right?
Exactly.
The fluids. They say rest, but they're talking out of both sides of their mouth because they're like, get your rest. You got to be down here at 7 a.m. tomorrow, and we'll be working.
Well, the rule of thumb if you're sick is if the illness is above your neck, exercise.
Okay.
It actually opens up your passages. If the illness is below your neck, don't work out.
Really?
Because if you had a true virus with muscle pains and aches and intestinal, I mean, who wants to go diarrhea on a treadmill? Please.
No.
It's not good.
I've tried it. No, I'm just joking. But you're a Birds fan.
I'm a Birds fan.
You're a Birds fan, and you're an athlete.
I played football in college. Played in Philadelphia area also. Obviously, I was all state. In fact, my only big concussion was in that All-Star game that I played in.
Really?
But in college, I never got hurt. Of course, I wasn't good enough to play at your level, but it was.
You actually made a good decision if you had a choice. I mean, like I'd have rather been you than me.
But I was thinking about this recently because I getting asked would I recommend sports to my kids, and my son did play football. Was captain of his team in high school, and I encouraged him, and I told him what I'll tell your listeners and viewers. Football changed my life.
Yeah.
It taught me to compete. It taught me how to deal with failure. It taught me how to win. Yeah. And the reason our country does so well vis-a-vis other nations is because we actually teach our youth how to do those things. There's no class in high school about leadership 101.
Yeah, no.
Right?
That's why I always think football should get a credit because I've applied things that I learned like in college playing for Al Groh at Virginia and the teamwork, the problem solving, the social stuff. I mean, like getting to go to work every day with kids that did not grow up where I grew up. I mean, it was a game-changing experience for the rest of my life, and you don't get a credit. You don't get paid, okay, that's one thing, but you don't get a credit. You spend 8 hours in the building. It's like, especially when you were at Harvard, right?
Yes.
So how do you manage that? It's crazy.
The juggling that's required for a college athlete to perform is remarkable, but I don't know of a college athlete that's not thrilled that they had the opportunity to learn those classes because the mentoring that we got I coached Restic when I was playing at Harvard was incredibly important to my future. And when I was talking to my son about playing college sports, I said, I don't even care if you're any good. Have a good coach, because no one's going to mentor you that way. And I'm on the President's Council for Fitness and Nutrition. It's a real crisis in America. We don't have any coaches.
Yeah.
We don't have any high school coaches. We don't have any middle school coaches. A lot of people who used to coach don't have the time or the money anymore. The kids don't want to play sports.
It's a thankless job, relatively speaking.
Except if you're actually doing
it.
It's like teaching. But that is what made this country what it is, and we have forfeited that with the belief that test scores equate that. Listen, I studied math and biology, and I had to do it to be a doctor.
Yeah.
I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
I'm not in any way dismissing the value of that, but this nation will not be the nation that it could be if we don't have a rite of passage for young people to become adults.
Absolutely.
And we lose that if we don't endorse the arts and sports. I include the arts on purpose. It's not about a bunch of eggheads, banging their heads together.
No.
It's about the fact that extracurricular activities are critical to the nation.
It's funny the way we do look at art and football, and the way that we treat one as acceptable kind of intellectual exercise, and it's art. I mean, it's not something academic necessarily, but neither is football. But both build a ton of skills, and I don't know why football always gets the stigma because we're all meatballs, I guess. But there's some really smart players I play with. You have to be very smart to play in a league a long time.
Sure.
To play in college and balance that time and everything at Harvard or Virginia, it's crazy.
Well, you're connecting dots.
Yeah.
When you're playing sports and art, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
In sports, whatever your position is, you're doing 3D spatial reconstructions.
Yeah.
The brain is actually tasked in ways that are much more complicated than studying a differential equation in calculus. And they're both important, but they're different. And art, similarly, allows you to connect the dots for creativity that others can't. That's a real uniqueness. And you use those. And I'll tell you, in heart surgery, there's a disproportionate number of athletes because so many of us actually learn to deal with the pressure of being in the OR.
Yeah.
Think about it. We're taking a knife to your chest.
Yeah, dude.
Right?
Come
I mean,
on.
there's a fine line between arrogance and confidence there. And sports does that same thing. You got to be confident you can make it, but not so much you do foolish things to hurt your team.
Right. You can't be that gambler.
No, you can't. Don't be that person.
So you mentioned the concussion thing. That's always on the radar of everybody. Before you're the perfect guy to talk to. Did you watch the Hernandez doc?
I had Jonathan Hernandez on my show yesterday.
Okay.
And he wouldn't go on the doc.
Yeah.
Because he didn't like the way they're doing it. So we had him, and his mom has some video that audio material from prison actually, talking to Aaron on it, and it is so compelling to me, his story.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't just CTE, it wasn't just traumatic encephalopathy, although that was a big part of it. He was sexually abused as a child, which Jonathan shared with me. Jonathan was his quarterback initially. So 2 years older, and felt terribly guilty that Aaron was abused and he was unaware of it. He couldn't protect his younger brother. Their father was a great athlete, but abusive. And he said it slapped the gay out of you. I'm sorry, that's his word, not mine.
Ridiculous.
That's how they phrased it. So he couldn't be honest about who he was. So he lived a lie, and it created a conflict in his mind that started to expose itself when he was playing in Florida. And that team had 20 people go to the pros. I mean, these guys were. Tim Tebow was his quarterback. He had everything. A 5-year, $40 million contract for the Pats, and a great athlete, and yet he threw it away because he couldn't live the lie anymore. And I think that's a life lesson for all of us, which is why the Aaron Hernandez story is not about good or bad for the NFL. It's about the fall of a potential great American, what went wrong.
And I also think it's a lesson with people, and I'm not a CT denier, and I mean, tau protein is observable in the brain. You can't do it while we're living, obviously, but if you cut me open right now, I might have some in my head. Now,
I might have some.
You might have some. We're acting normally, so my issue is always the jumping the gun on predicting a behavioral outcome. I don't think we're there yet. What do you say?
Not there at all. It also depends what part of your brain develops the most impact. The prefrontal cortex, where Aaron did have a lot of damage at autopsy, is the decision-making part of the brain. And so Jonathan was pretty honest about saying that he does believe it influenced his decision-making process. And Jonathan shared some insights about what his brother was going through after he was convicted of killing his best friend. And why do you kill your best friend? Basically his brother-in-law he killed. And that's not normal behavior. So I think it was part of it, but it wasn't
a lot of traumas. That's the whole thing is we just ignore all these for society that wants to talk about mental health and say we need to get better at it. We pop on the Hernandez documentary and most people's takeaway is his brain was broken. There were 10 traumas in his life.
Over and over again.
I stopped counting. I mean, and it's the complete picture of, what I hate is when somebody tells me is that I played football for 11 years, so I'm going to automatically lose my agency at some point. There's plenty of good examples of guys that played for a long time. We just don't know enough yet. That's where I'm at. So
I think a lot of the attention shouldn't be on professional football players who made a decision as an adult. And to your point, I think most would be okay. But we don't know, and that mystery is fear. It induces fear. But I don't want to have moms not let their kids play football anymore. That's not good for any of us. And that's going to happen if we're not serious about the illness and start doing some investigations about how to diagnose it earlier. As an example, we know that young kids, if they get hurt, they'll bounce back pretty quickly. But you got to make a diagnosis. And I know a lot of young people in the pros don't want to get pulled out of a game because that's their chance.
Right.
And so we need to make professional football players feel comfortable telling the truth if they've been hurt.
And that's a big stigma that was around for a long time. And you see it with guys on the sideline that don't look right and they don't want to come out of the game because it's the ultimate like peer pressure sport, and it's the alpha male, like I can't show weakness.
If you had took a bad hit and had a head injury that you thought was a concussion, would you pull yourself out of a game?
If it was bad enough, I would, depending on the game.
Well,
and that's the problem. Is like if I get dinged in the Super Bowl, good luck. You got to pull me out, and I think that's where they have to take it out of players' hands. They have to say, we're going to take this decision out of these guys' hands because we're ingrained to just push through everything.
Well, the good news is we're going to have the ability to diagnose tau protein release on a blood test probably.
So we're close.
We're getting close.
Generation away?
Oh, no, a couple years. Not even a couple years. I saw some really exciting data recently. It could be a year or 2 years.
Yeah.
But that'll help. But ultimately, I think the best way of figuring out that you had a concussion is your processing time for decisions.
Yes.
And those are tests you can do right now.
Yes.
They ought to be enforced not just at the NFL, but throughout all sports. Yeah. And give yourself a week or two off, and you'll be able to bounce back and not have had a long-term impact, most likely from the concussion. All NFL players should be on an antioxidant regimen and be taking omega-3s during the season because it helps the brain rebuild itself. And then there's going to be some point where you say, okay, it's just too much a risk for you. As great as you are, your career is now over. And that's okay because I want you to be around and play the long game.
I want to play with my kids, and I want to be present. You mentioned we're talking about concussions. I feel like I have a concussion right now, Doc, but I have a hangover. Okay, I didn't realize that martinis are more than one unit of alcohol usually.
Oh my goodness.
So my question about hangovers, and I've been feeling this way a long time, is if there are all these secret hangovers, like why do I hear so many cures, these hangover fixes? None of them work. If one worked, everybody would be doing it. The only solution is not to drink, right?
Very smart drinker. Most people do not acknowledge that. In medicine, is an adage: if you've got more than one solution, you have no good ones.
Dr. Oz called me a smart drinker. This is great.
But here's the thing. The reason you get a hangover, it's getting into the pathophysiology here.
I love pathophysiology.
Okay. So the brain is like a walnut. It shrivels down when you're hungover because it's primarily about dehydration, but the coconut skull stays the same. So you're basically shaking that walnut inside of his coconut.
Yeah, that's how I feel.
It hurts, right. So a couple things. First off, if you can alternate alcohol with water continually through the evening, that's really helpful. Because if you're not dehydrated, you won't have a problem. Number two, clear alcohols are much safer. When you have darker alcohols, the brandies, the whiskeys, that congener, which is what makes it dark, is a toxin. It's actually really difficult for the body to deal with that. Clear alcohols, tequila is my favorite.
Okay. What tequila do you like?
I like Don Cuevos. I like them all.
You like them all?
I'm a big tequila fan. And part of the reason I love it is it's got agave in it. It comes from agave, so it's a little bit sweetish, but it's not. There's not more calories than other alcohols. So 66 calories for an ounce. You can put a little seltzer water or lime, and that's all you need. So if you're on a diet, and that's why all the women love tequila. That's why the space is exploding.
The people in great shape are all drinking
tequila.
What's up, dude? Prince is there. I got Dr. Oz here on the show. My buddies, this is the great thing about this week is you run into all your friends. So,
or you just serve drinks, you'd be all set.
No, it would be great. Now my follow-up question on the clear liquor is, I eat the olives out of the martini glass. Is that safe? They say lemons are the most unsafe thing in a restaurant.
Lemons are unsafe because of the rind.
Okay.
I'm not concerned about the olives as much.
Okay, good.
We don't all handle the olive.
Real quick, before I let you go,
I see.
But I got marijuana on here. I made news because evidently I'm like a serial killer because I smoke marijuana.
I saw it.
I came out and revealed that I
so why do you smoke marijuana?
Devil's lettuce. I was
devil's lettuce.
Yeah, I was an insomniac like my whole life. Also, helps me manage my stress. I have anxiety. Not terrible, not debilitating. And Brandon Brooks, who plays for the Eagles, had to miss a game because of panic attacks this year. I'm not like that, but my whole life, trouble sleeping, etc. For me, it settles me down at the end of the night, and I'm very thoughtless as I drift off.
How old were you when you started smoking marijuana?
Golly, first year of college.
Okay, so a couple of things about marijuana. I'm a big fan of medical marijuana.
Yeah.
I think it is a hypocrisy that we will be embarrassed about for generations if we don't deal with the reality that medical marijuana is safer than opiates. A lot of pro athletes do better with medical marijuana than the drugs they might take for chronic aches and pains. Insomnia is probably a pretty good tool. Anxiety, for sure, it's effective on. And we should be using it in older folks as well because some of the chronic issues they're facing are better dealt with marijuana. It's safer. That stated, I don't want young people smoking recreationally.
I agree. Well, there's a brain development thing,
Exactly.
right? Yeah, the teenagers, it's not good.
And you don't
for-
want to grow up thinking you got to smoke pot to be able to get through life. If by the time you're in college, that's mostly gone.
Yeah.
But I don't want high schoolers feeling that's
I
part of
agree.
the equation.
I agree.
But you get past that, then most people are on the same page here. 34 states have embraced medical marijuana.
Yeah.
I actually believe we ought to make it acceptable for older folks because they're safe.
Yeah.
Let people who are struggling with aging issues smoke marijuana. The government has got to get out of the way. People at the DEA and FDA are not against marijuana.
Yeah.
They just want to regulate it,
Right,
which
right.
I think they're right on. And CBD is a problem because CBD, half it's fake.
It's all fake.
So-
I get the good stuff, the full spectrum. the
Right, but
real
most people
good
don't know
stuff.
how to get the
Most
good stuff.
people are going to a gas station taking this bullshit, and then also these vape pens, that are killing people. The vitamin E
Yeah.
oil in there.
They ought to
So
regulate it.
It's
Thank
safe.
you.
Thank you.
We agree.
Yeah,
The
Dr.
devil's
Oz,
lettuce.
man, this is awesome. This is the man here, Philly fan too.